That should be working. Okay.
So they changed our housing with COVID, and so you don't have to be very homeless. You can be, if you're in a really short housing, we can use our free housing, which used to, that would be called homeless prevention in the past, but now it's private housing.
I think we're about
So if you have that happen to somebody, or you can do that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's all right. That's okay. Okay, so we have many students online, and then this is the.
Okay, so the Zoom camera's on there, on my laptop, and if you're on Zoom, we're about to get started. I'll request at this minute, if you're on Zoom, just mute yourself, and if you have a question or comment, you can use your raise hand function. We have someone monitoring the Zoom room to, and we'll address your question or comment during the event. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being at our event. This is Poverty in Yolo County. My name is Farah Amjad. I'm a third-year law student and community services representative with the LSA, which is our Law Student Association, basically student government here at King Hall. I'd also like to introduce Alex Seymour, who is also community service representative. So we have a small audience, so feel free to we have a structure to the event, but if you have questions you want to ask between questions that we ask the panelists, please, we welcome them. And we also welcome the folks on Zoom to ask questions. And we do have a good audience on Zoom, and this is being recorded. Okay, so Alex and I put this event together to give us all an opportunity to discuss a topic that we don't often discuss directly in law school. As law students, we discuss and address legal problems in our society that are a result of poverty, but we don't really talk about poverty by itself. I don't think there's a class offered in our school that directly looks at what is poverty. So today we're just going to do that. We're going to discuss what poverty is, what it looks like in our community, and what we can do to address it, not as just as lawyers, but also simply as members of our local community. We encourage today you to think about serving the poor, not just from a professional perspective, but from being a good community member. So to help us think about these issues, we have invited the executive directors of 3 local nonprofit organizations who really are at the forefront of addressing poverty in Yolo County. I'm just going to mention who they are right now, and then we'll have Alex basically do the panel, and they'll introduce and tell you a little bit about their organizations and who they are. Okay, so the first we have Michael Bish, who is the executive director of Yolo Food Bank. Then we have Doug Zeck, who is the executive director of Fourth and Hope. And then we have Lynette Erlmeyer, who is the executive director of Empower Yolo. And then I'll let Alex speak.
So hi everyone, and thank you, Farah. First, I'd like to start by thanking our panelists for being here with us today. And I hope my voice is loud enough. But thank you for being here for this timely and important conversation about poverty in Yolo County. So to start us off, I was just wondering if each of you could tell us a little bit more about yourselves. And this can be anything that you feel comfortable sharing about your personal and professional background. And I think we can go from left to right, so in this direction.
Hello, my name is Michael Bish. I'm the executive director of Yolo Food Bank. My background is in international banking, small business formation, startups. I became executive director of Yolo Food Bank about 4 years ago because I wanted to apply startup type principles to the nonprofit sector. I'll let my colleagues judge on how successful that has worked out. Just a real quick comment about the poverty thing. What I heard was something about addressing poverty. You guys might have a different opinion, but I think most of our work is on mitigating poverty. I don't know how much success we're actually having with addressing poverty, which in my mind is taking on the root causes of poverty, reinventing the structures that are creating poverty faster than we can address it or mitigate it. But that's my introduction.
Thank you.
Doug Zeck, I'm the executive director of Fourth and Hope. My background, I spent 18 years in a corporate food sales environment, and but grew up the son of a pastor, grandson of a pastor, and the work that my grandfather did was the beginning days of what we now know as Fourth and Hope. coming back to Woodland after years living elsewhere, I wanted to be a part of helping those that were actually in the grips of poverty and helping triage that. I found myself on the board at Fourth and Hope, and then eventually in 2013 as the executive director. Kind of to what Michael was saying, we are triage, we're a safety net for those that are already, have already fallen into poverty, and so prevention is something that we all have to embrace as a community. I think it's no matter who you are, the community you live in, we have some sort of responsibility in addressing poverty. And I know I'll speak for us, it probably is true for the other two that are here, but we don't have the solution. We are a part of providing solution in partnership with everybody. And so I am a firm believer that no one is removed from the issues of our neighbors, and because someday we might have those same issues ourselves. And so, I'm big on I am a pastor as well, so I'm big on preaching about community and how important it is that we recognize we're a part of a community and helping one another. But again, we're here to help those that have already fallen into this place of poverty, and how can we help them climb out of it?
I'm Lynette Erlmeyer, Executive Director of Empower Yolo, and Empower Yolo is a multi-service agency, but its roots are working with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking and their children. And that is sort of my background anyway. I've been doing that part for about 29 years. But over the past, I suppose, 10 years, the needs in the community have really risen. And one thing that I love about nonprofit work is that you can pivot when needed to help your community. And so Empower Yolo now does homeless and housing services for people who are housing insecure or homeless. And we provide a lot of other services like helping people sign up for benefits and those things. And as they said, I truly do believe it is a community effort. And one thing that has impressed me the most over the past 2 years, as more people are struggling and more people are in need, there's been more people who are reaching out to help their neighbor. And nonprofits are like big neighbors. So we've all reached out to each other in many ways to work on the issues of poverty in this community and to keep people housed and fed and healthy. And so the last 2 years have really emphasized the ability of communities to answer in times of crisis. And I really hope we don't lose that when we get to the new normal.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and what you do. On to our next question. Can each of you briefly describe your organization's mission and how your organization in particular addresses poverty? And we can go this way again.
Well, we just went through an exercise in developing a new vision statement and a new mission statement. It's very much along the lines of what the two of you were just talking about. It's been clear to me since even before I joined the food bank that the work that we do goes far beyond simply providing food assistance. And so we've incorporated the notions of connecting community with one another, convening conversations about the needs of the community, and of course, collaborating into our mission statement. I wish I could recite our new mission statement, but I can't off the top of my head. That's how new it is. And so what was the rest of your question besides?
Yeah, the second part was how your organization in particular addresses poverty.
Yeah, so our focus is on providing food assistance to those who are struggling either in poverty or near poverty. And that has kind of a ripple-on effect. The folks that are typically food insecure are also housing insecure and have a multitude of other challenges in their lives. And so when we provide $300, $400, $500 worth of groceries to these individuals, that then frees up their financial resources to pay their rent or pay for their prescription medications or pay for childcare or or whatever their family needs happen to be. So that's, the work goes quite a bit beyond simply providing nutrition. And we also provide services to our nonprofit partners. So we work with 80 nonprofits around the county, and these are two of our dear partners here who provide invaluable services, and we're super pleased that we can support their missions. And we're going to do some high five somewhere along the way.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of work, that's for sure. You want to repeat that first part of the question?
Yeah.
I just really caught it when you're saying.
So can you briefly describe your organization's mission?
So Fourth and Hope's mission is to feed, clothe, shelter, and facilitate recovery for those in need and show the love of Jesus Christ in words and actions. And that's our mission statement. We have several different programs. Our flagship program is our overnight emergency shelter. Recently, during this COVID season, actually, we opened up the new facility out at East Beamer near County Road 102 over in Woodland.
Mm-hmm.
It's an 8-acre campus that's going to be developed out over the next couple years. Currently it's a 100-bed homeless shelter that's also 24/7 operation. So there's day services available for that. So if people are in need of showers or food or laundry services, they can come there during the day and receive those services. We do have opportunities for them to come and check into the shelter in the evenings. 6 o'clock is typically our intake or check-in time, but because of day services, they can also do that throughout the day. The shelter's capacity is 100 individuals, and we've had times that we've been operating in that 90 range. Currently, it is down slightly, which is, there's a seasonality that comes periodically in about a month or two every year. There's a couple months that are down. We anticipate that we'll be back to full heading into the end of the year. With that, we also have housing programs that we also help run. Permanent supportive housing is the avenue we've taken when it comes to housing. So it's helping place them into a living situation where we're also going to provide services there with case management to keep them stably housed. We have a transitional housing for those that might be transitioning early out of a lockdown facility, and so to help them reintegrate into society, get jobs, provide stability for themselves. We also provide those types of services on our housing front, and also some housing for those that are victims of crime. And then so that's the housing and homeless services side of Fourth and Hope. On the other side, we have our treatment services. So we have outpatient hospital, fully fulfilled residential facility, also located in Woodland. All these programs are in some state of transition or growth right now because before the advent of this pandemic, we had already set in motion a lot of these plans to grow and expand services because as mentioned earlier, poverty had far surpassed our capacity as an organization. And we're not trying to duplicate what other organizations or partners are doing, but we saw there was still need in the lanes that we were already operating in. So we looked at expanding our services over the last couple of years, and I'm sure it'll take several more. So that's the nature of how we're addressing it. Most recently, an area that we've been adding to our program to strengthen it and help provide better outcomes for those that meet with us at Fourth and Hope is we've added on a team of case managers that are on more of a clinical level case management team because of some of the mental health issues that we do see ever growing in the people that we are trying to show great compassion to and help along the way. And so that's been an area that we've tried to address in helping them grow out of this position of poverty they may be finding themselves in. And then I'll make a side note on the other side of my life as a church leader. We started partnering with the food bank and doing a distribution on Monday evenings, and I've marveled at the great need. We'll serve 600 individuals on average on a Monday evening every week. We've been doing it for over a year, and these are people that are not homeless. They're people that are housed. They're potentially driving decent vehicles, but they have to choose between paying rent, and taking care of their transportation so they can get to work every day, or buying groceries. And so I do appreciate our partnerships and we work a lot with Empower Yolo and with the food bank, so I do appreciate the partnerships here in this room.
So Empower Yolo, as I mentioned before, is a sexual assault and domestic violence provider. And while domestic violence can happen to anyone, the correlation between domestic violence and poverty is undeniable. When we see single moms who end up in a domestic violence shelter or just struggling on their own to make it, it's really difficult for them to move on. So that part has always been part of the work that we've done, both to address poverty for women and children, but also in the community. So we do have a shelter for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. We also have a crime victim shelter, and which is interesting because we both have shelters, and there are other shelters. There are not enough shelter beds in this county for all of the homeless, and I think we all need to be very frank and upfront about that. When I hear all the time, people saying things like, oh, well, there's an open bed here, or there's an open bed there, that is not really seeing the problem of homelessness. It's not just about the bed or where to sleep. It's just about the whole person and what their needs are. And so I think as we shifted, we merged with another agency called Center for Families, and they already had some rapid rehousing programs, and those have really grown. And so those programs are meant to bring people off the street into homes. And I have to say that money for rent in Yolo County is not the #1 problem. It is housing itself. There is no housing. And so we're sitting here in this county, we were just talking about this as it started. We're sitting here with funds to help people pay their rent. There are no apartments that are available. There are emergency housing vouchers that are available with the county, and we're having a difficult time getting people leased up. And so while people who are home insecure obviously are in that range of what we would call the poverty level, there's just not enough places for people to go, and we need to be frank about that, and we need to make changes in that. Some of the other work that we do, we also do food distribution, and as he said, one of our food distribution sites is in the little town of Yolo, and a lot of people don't even know there is a little town of Yolo. I think it has about 300 residents. Before the pandemic, we did about 25 families a week, or every other week, 25 families every other week who came to food distribution. Now we have it every single week, and I was there last week, and we had 103 people come, and that serves over 300 people. So as Doug mentioned, people who never needed our services before, people who were able to pay their rent or do these other things, are having to figure out now how to stretch every dollar. And so they're reaching out for things like food assistance. But they're asking for more than that too. And I think one of the things that all of us address all the time is that even if you took advantage of every single thing that was out there to help you, so you had rental assistance, you had utility assistance, you had food assistance, you still need cash. You need to be able to do your laundry, you need to be able to buy a pair of socks, you need to, get your medication, whatever it is, you still need cash. And if you are homeless or don't have transportation or have any of those other things, getting cash, that is going to be your hardest thing. And just think about it. If you didn't have any cash, what would you do for the rest of the month? And I really think that's something that we all need to look at. And there needs to be a way to provide more flexible funding for people so that they can meet their own needs.
Alex, can I ask a follow-up to this? So Lynette, what you talked about right now with that, you know, you have the cash sitting for like to help people pay the rent, but there is no housing there. So that seems like a structural problem. And Michael earlier said that, you know, that what you think of it as mitigating poverty versus addressing poverty, because it may not be nonprofits may not have the capacity to address. I'm putting some of these words in your mouth, addressing poverty. So it seems like, could you all talk a little bit more about, like, if nonprofits are more focused on mitigating poverty, then how does these increasing structural challenges associated with poverty kind of impact your work? Like, how do you have opportunities to kind of interact with policymakers to address the structural problems? Could you guys more expand on the mitigation versus addressing the structural issues?
I'd love to dive into this piece.
Yeah.
So I want to say it was August or September of last year where we had finally gotten ourselves, the food bank, had gotten ourselves into a position where we felt that we had a pretty good grip on our ability to respond to the pandemic and meet the needs that we were trying to serve in the community. And so we started, it dawned on us that, I used earlier the term mitigating. I like Doug's term a lot better, triage. The way we thought of it was that we were treating this endless stream of battlefield wounds, just these gaping wounds, and just working as hard as we could to treat that. But the battle was still ongoing, and there was just an endless supply of wounded individuals, deeply wounded individuals. And so we started thinking about how do we go beyond simply triage and addressing the root causes of poverty. And of course, one of the key elements of that is advocacy, and I would say robust, effective advocacy to address the inequalities in our housing system, the inequalities in our food system, the inequalities in our labor markets, the unfair pricing of labor. And just to give you an example of the unfair pricing of labor, so there's this new category of individuals that we discovered during the pandemic, essential workers, right? These are folks that none of us can survive without them showing up for work every single day. Lo and behold, these essential workers, many of these essential workers are the very people that we're talking about. These are the most vulnerable members of our communities, and we can't do without them, yet we pay them subsistence wages. We pay them wages where they can't support their families, and so they rely on our services. So really, we shouldn't be calling them essential workers. We should be calling them disposable workers, because that's how we treat them. And so also the tax system is clearly broken, right? There's certain individuals, like 1%, 3%, that really benefit from our tax system. And then there's something like a third of the families in the region that are really treated inequitably by the tax system. So if we're going to advance our work, we're going to have to go after these systems, and Yolo Food Bank has been trying to do that since September of last year. But it's not easy. There's a reason why these systems are in place the way they are, right? There's vested interests that want to perpetuate the system. They have a lot of input on policy, on politics, and when you start speaking out against these things, it starts raising the temperature, and there's resistance, and people start pushing back, and it becomes a little bit tough. And for many of us, particularly for the food bank, we're almost entirely reliant upon donations. We only get about 10% of our budget covered by government grants. The rest is through donations, and a lot of our work is done by volunteers. And so it's this fine line between getting into these conversations and raising community awareness and having these community conversations versus pissing off a bunch of people. Yeah. So Doug is super eloquent here and quite a diplomat. He's gonna enlighten us on how he's navigating this minefield.
Well, I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago we started talking a lot to local electeds, city leaders, county leaders, and just beating on the door that we just don't have enough housing. And so the housing inventory stock, and we weren't the only ones. It's been talked about a lot, and so, but we were starting to get buy-in about 3 or 4 years ago in this area, and here we are, 4 years later, and we're just starting to see some extreme low-income housing come on. It's a drop in the bucket to what's needed, and so advocacy is key, and it can be tiring at times because I can go advocate to a city manager and turn around, they move on and go to another city, and now I got a new city manager to advocate to and re-educate. So you find in your role in my role as an executive director, working more with local jurisdictions and trying to keep them abreast of what's going on. The other thing is continuing to remind the policymakers that don't look at us nonprofits as solving your issue. You solve the issue with your nonprofits, and that we're all in it together. It's the community piece I mentioned earlier, and always be the squeaky wheel, because if you're not, there's people that literally lose their lives, and so we have to keep raising the flag that there is great need. We need more housing. We need more housing. The cities need to relax some of the fees when it comes to building housing, and the 8-acre parcel we're working on right now, we had initially gone into it with all fees were going to be waived, and now we're probably looking at $700,000 in fees when it's all said and done. Now, and that's frustrating to me because that's money that could really benefit individuals, right? Now, is it the city only's fault? No, they are having to pay fees to other entities, whether it's school districts or county, or so there's a lot of pressure out there on some of that, but we have to those boring meetings, city council meetings, those county supervisor meetings. I always read to see what's coming up, because if it's something I need to speak to, whether it's in the meeting or ahead of time, I really try to get involved in that as much as possible. Those that were here to help, that are, when you're in a state of poverty, you're trying to save your dignity. But once you fall straight into poverty, you've lost your dignity. So you quit fighting for yourself. And so we are here and hopefully engaging some of you all to always be fighting for those that have lost their dignity and won't fight for themselves. And some of that is sitting in an office at the city, or sitting with the county supervisor having coffee, whatever that might be. And then here's another one and I haven't done any work here yet, but another industry that really needs to hear loud advocacy, and that is the banking industry, because they're the ones that are restrictive when it comes to loaning money for when was the last time we saw a large apartment complex built outside of Davis? And so, and I know that they've been trying to in West Sacramento. I'm in Woodland primarily, and we haven't seen a lot of that in Woodland. I know there's some on the horizon, but the reason you don't see a lot of it is because banks don't want to release the dollars for those types of building projects. But I don't want to ramble on, but advocacy is huge and part of what we do.
I don't know how to even add to that. That's exactly, I mean, I agree with everything that you said, and you really do have to have that advocacy role all the time. Sometimes I think I could probably work with the people who come in our office every day, and I would be tired at the end of the day. But when it's advocating for your clients all the time, advocating for the people that you work for all the time, with all of these other businesses and the government and all of that, that's what's exhausting. It really is. Mm-hmm. But if we, I always think about this with all of my resources. If I don't advocate for them, who would? I mean, they don't have the resources to do that, or even know where to start. So I think that advocacy is probably one of the most important things that we do.
Yeah.
So I know you guys have talked about housing and the banking industry, but what other major societal contributors contribute to poverty in this area?
The cost of healthcare. I think that is a big thing for the people that we serve. It is definitely the cost of healthcare. The number of people who just come into our office because they can't fill a $10 prescription, and can we help them with that? On to people who need, chronic care, or just end up in the hospital. Once you have a major life health event, if you were already struggling, you might not come back from that, especially today.
That's a tough question because there's so many, every individual we meet with has unique circumstances. And so on a macro level, it is hard to identify just a couple areas because it could be different. I mean, we see a lot of individuals that substance use is a huge issue for them, and how they got there could differentiate from person to person. And so we'll sit here and we'll talk a lot about lack of housing and homeless issues. With my other hat on, we need to talk more about regulations around prescription drugs and really what's going on in enforcement around illegal drugs and that type of thing. Not to penalize necessarily those that are using, but really going after the sources and talking about that more often, because it's devastating a society, and it's not often talked about enough.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts around this. So one of the systems that's definitely inequitable is the food system. It's a little bit different than these other systemic issues such as housing, affordable health care, available mental health care, because there's just not enough capacity. What's different about the food system is there's actually a surplus of food being produced, right? There's not a surplus of housing. Doug just made it super, and Lynette made super clear that it's the exact opposite, right? There's a massive deficit of housing. It's the same with healthcare. There's not enough healthcare capacity out there. The food system is very, very different. There's this massive surplus, and any given day in Yolo County, there's anywhere between 30 and 40% too much food, more food than can be possibly sold by the grocery stores. But most of this food is transported to the landfill right now. So every single day, there's trucks and trucks and trucks transporting surplus edible food to the landfill. So we don't have a food production issue. We have a food redistribution problem. And unfortunately, all of the jurisdictions up and down the state of California, they are so vested in perpetuating the current system of paying garbage companies to transport that surplus edible food to a landfill instead of the kitchen tables of our most vulnerable residents. And it's beyond frustrating. We've been working for 3 years on trying to get our local jurisdictions to reverse course on the current system, and they're just totally set in their ways. And even though we're in the middle of a pandemic and everybody sees how much need is out there, we just can't get them to budge. I should also point out, that campus is like a microcosm of these larger community issues, right? The food insecurity rate here on campus is something like 44%. I would imagine that the housing insecurity rate's got to be somewhere in that neighborhood. There's all kinds of mental health challenges going on campus, and those are all interwoven together. And so, yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Sorry, another question, can you guys talk about this issue of dignity? I think Lynette mentioned, or Doug might have mentioned as well. So I know I was looking through the Yolo Food Bank's Instagram, and you guys have these profiles of individuals you have served. And it was really informative, kind of reading through their the individual stories. And I thought that was a really good way to kind of just affirm their individual stories and dignity. So could you talk about how your organizations further do that? But also what can sort of just us everyday people do to kind of respect the dignity of poor people, and not just see them as people who need help or who need something?
I have some thoughts about that.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so dignity is a big deal at Yolo Food Bank. We don't judge anybody. We don't care what kind of car they drive up into one of our distributions or why they're coming. We care why they're coming, but we don't judge why they're coming. We have no means testing at all. Anybody can show up and receive the same amount of food as any of the other families. That said, we don't do enough to preserve dignity. We have been working really hard on trying to figure out new distribution methods to meet the needs of our most vulnerable community members, so that it enhances their dignity instead of detracting from their dignity. And it's not easy. A lot of that's pretty expensive to do a better job. And you know, that's where we're falling short in some of the funding. But we're definitely super interested in how we can do that more. A lot of that's going to depend on our nonprofit partners. Our nonprofit partners, since we're a county-wide organization operating really on a large scale, we don't have those deep community connections like many of our nonprofit partners who provide these wraparound services, right? They have much more intimate relationships with these folks that we're serving. And so we're going to have to increasingly rely upon these partnerships to do a better job of meeting these needs in a way that preserves the dignity. And so here on campus, we've been doing a much better job. I mean, it's fantastic that they moved the student pantry from, you know, out of the basement in Freeborn Hall, and now it's in a place there in the MU. And yeah, we're looking forward to doing a new, I think we're going to be starting up a new distribution on the quad pretty soon. So any ideas that anybody has on how we can do a better job of providing equitable food assistance and while preserving dignity, we're all ears.
I don't know if this is a term or I'm just not coining it, but I would say just we as individuals need to remember that nice is contagious. And when you're working with someone, or maybe it's your first interaction with them and they are lacking dignity because of the place that they're in, so you find them angry, or because of their position in life, they have now tried to self-medicate to the point where now they're maybe dealing with mental health issues. Their actions should not determine how we treat them. And so dignity is, and our number one value at Fourth and Hope is compassion. It's something that we give away expecting nothing back in return, and we hope that our nice becomes contagious and eventually it starts to become a part of their life. And we can help with that but you have to be willing to spend time to get into this place of relationship with them, because one encounter may plant a seed, but it doesn't necessarily change a life. And so again, it's a lot of times we want to feel good as an individual, so we'll do a good deed. But was that really for them, or was it for you? And so, or because many times me doing a good deed and giving somebody $5 on the side of the street really is not necessarily going to help them out, but it made me feel good for a moment. And so a lot of what we would call good-hearted work is really done from a selfish point of view. And so, but if one individual says, you know what, I'm going to live a life that's more selfless and be nice because I want to help them, then you start seeing that become contagious and start to become a part of your community DNA. And when we live in a county that is nice, that's when you'll really start to see dignity change on a grand scale, but it starts with individuals. And so I hope that answers some of that question. And I don't mean to put everybody on the spot, but I will say is we do need to check our own heart, and why are we trying to do good for others? Because is it for you or is it for the other person? When it's for the other person, you'll find long-lasting payback on that. So.
Just, I'll piggyback on that a little bit, but just to be totally honest, when I talk about this all the time. My husband and I often pick up furniture from places and then deliver it to clients who don't have any furniture or are in need. And I always feel good at the end of that. And I always wonder why my staff doesn't want to do more of that physical labor piece, because I just feel good at the end of it, and it kind of energizes me for the next day, knowing that, okay, we helped that person and that felt really good. Okay, now tomorrow we're gonna do another. But on the dignity thing, I think one of the things that we've all learned is low barrier programs are the best way to go. So when you walk in our door, if you tell me you're a victim of domestic violence, you're a victim of domestic violence. I don't need you to prove that to me, right? If you tell me you're homeless, I don't need you to prove that you're homeless or that you need food. You don't have to prove that to me. You just come in and say, this is who I am, this is what I need. Now, we might have to ask you more questions because you're trying to enroll in some program where there's an eligibility requirement. But we really all try to be as low barrier as possible. And then to follow a voluntary service model too. So in order to get this service, you don't have to participate in this program over here, because there is, I think sometimes when people want to do good, one of the things that they do is to say, well, I'm going to help you, we're going to give you financial assistance, but you have to go to our budgeting class in order to get it. That assumes a lot about this person who needs the money. Like, you're just assuming they don't know how to do that. So I think that asking people what they need is probably the most important thing that we can do. And just believe people that that's truly what they need.
So Doug, I love the idea of you're nice becoming contagious. I hope you did coin that.
Yeah.
But I think I'll move into our final question for today. So as for all said in the beginning, some law students are familiar with the structural roots of poverty and how to kind of go about thinking of legal solutions to that. But what can law students do as community members to give back to their community and kind of aid in those things in the community? And we can go in any order now because we've kind of been switching that.
I can see Doug's got an answer.
I'm seeking an answer. I don't have an answer offhand.
I have enough.
Okay,
So all of our work and much of their work is, and I mentioned this earlier, is reliant upon philanthropists and volunteers, right? And so philanthropy, when you look at what that term means, is love of humankind, right? So everybody in this room and everybody watching, they can be a philanthropist. Doesn't mean you have to donate $50,000 a year to some cause. It could be $5, it could be 50 cents. And if you don't have funds, you can volunteer your time. They're both critical. There's all kinds of ways that every one of us can help out. We can help out by distributing food in food lines. We can help out by transporting some used furniture to a family in need, like Lynette was mentioning. There's all kinds of opportunities for folks to love humankind. And you know, we're blessed by having this university in this community. There is so much philanthropy here on campus. So many wonderful donors, so many wonderful volunteers. Yolo Food Bank right now has about 7,000 donors and 3,000 volunteers, and many of them come from campus.
I mean, the quick answer always is, you know, there's always, for nonprofits, resources are always limited. And so that's always, if resources are available, we're always going to ask you that you think about us as a nonprofit. On the homeless services side, our budget's about $1 million a year. And every year we have to go out and try to find that $1 million again. But we very seldom have that guarantee from year to year. And so, that resources is always something that will, if I stay awake at night, a lot of times it's around that. So I don't have a lot more to add. I just, I'm not here to ask for money. That's not what I'm here. I really hope that he's here to ask for money. My hope is that as you graduate, you move on into your career, and really what your life mission is, that your life mission would be not just to be successful on your own, but your success would spill over to others. And so that to me would define success, is that my life made other lives better. And so if you can find a way to do that, that would be amazing.
That's interesting because I was at Arlington Cemetery one time and on all those headstones, I noticed this one that said he made lives better for other people or something like that. It was just a little phrase like that. And I thought if that was the only thing anyone could say about me at the end of my life, that would be a perfect way to sum that up. But I do think that, as you said, as you leave here and go on to do other great things, that you remember that there's people in need. And, you know, for us, we have a whole group of volunteer attorneys that are changing lives. And they only do it one afternoon a week, or actually they rotate. So they only do it one afternoon a month each. And it is something that our clients need so much. And it only takes so much of their time to do that. There are so many ways you can volunteer, so many ways you can do other things. But I do think it's that piece of compassion. And when you run into somebody who is less fortunate than you, just reaching out and even a moment of listening to what someone has to say goes a long way. You know, we have a 24-hour crisis line, and most of the people who call that don't want something. They just want someone to hear what they have to say. They just want to say it out loud. And so I think that is really important, and that we don't give enough value to people's time and doing those kinds of things for people. So I really do think if you can hear people, that's important. And then, you know, as I talk about us being low barrier, take your judgments and put that aside. You know, when you're in the grocery store and the person in front of you is using their CalFresh to buy groceries and they've got on a really nice outfit, don't make that assumption that, you know, that they don't need food stamps or that they don't need that kind of assistance. I mean, I hear that all the time, and I remember one time in particular, I was in a grocery store, and a client of ours was 2 people ahead of me in line, and we have a clothing closet, and I knew that this woman had gotten her clothes from the clothing closet, but she looked sharp, and her son also was wearing clothes from the clothing closet, and he looked sharp. And this person right in front of me in line said, "Can you believe that? She's using food stamps, and look how she's dressed." And I couldn't say, well, she got those clothes from the clothing closet. That wasn't my role, and I couldn't say anything. And I was kind of just taken aback, and I thought, who are you to judge how she's paying for this? So I do think maybe that's one of the most lifelong things that you can do, is to not judge others and show compassion.
Thank you so much. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, the other way that individuals can help out besides philanthropy is through the advocacy piece, right? The more voices join together, the more powerful the advocacy is. It's man, it's a lonely battle. You're standing up there at the podium at a city council meeting or a board of supervisors meeting, and sometimes you're the only one standing there speaking up. And yeah, it's not always fun.
Great. Well, thank you all for that. We do have a few minutes for questions. So first I'll look to the people in the room. So anyone in person have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. It's probably one you all are currently dealing with. But how has COVID-19 affected what you do and people coming to you? How has it affected them, their lives?
It's created more work. We at in all programs, and we are blessed to have UC Davis right here, because as Healthy Davis Together came on and now Healthy Yolo, we've been able to add weekly testing in all our programs, which has benefited those that we serve. So those are some of the positives. On the hard side of things, the stress on our own staff has grown drastically. We would consider our staff essential workers, so they're not able to work from home. They're frontline workers, and so But when you start adding testing to that, and then we've had to change how we have a congregate shelter. So we've had to spread the beds further apart, which and have added protocols in our day-to-day activities. We unfortunately have across not just our programs, but there's been programs similar to ours, and we've all seen some outbreaks within some of those congregate settings, and we've seen people succumb to the illness, and that's been hard. I just did a memorial service for an individual that didn't have family that lived in our shelter for a while last week, and so it's been hard. But on the other side, we've been also in like a memorial service, we can celebrate the fact that everybody there, including staff, we were their family until they weren't here any longer, and so so we can find some peace in that. There's been added cost that goes along with this, and so that there's been some budgetary concerns that comes with that. There has been, though, because of some of the relief funding out there, we've seen a lot of additional funding come our way. It's such a bizarre time. In some ways, funding-wise, we're flush right now because of COVID, even with the additional work. So I'm a little bit more concerned about what's going to happen when some of this relief funding dissipates. So it's can't describe what we've gone through in the last 2 years. Maybe you can.
I think one of the biggest lifts that we had was Project Room Key. If you're not familiar with that, it was a program taking homeless people off the street who were vulnerable to COVID and putting them in hotel rooms. And some of them stayed there for a year and some only a few months. And now most of those programs have ended, but so it's just COVID positive people who don't have anywhere to go, who are in those motels. But I think, so at the beginning of the pandemic, we were able to do that in our communities. We were able to take homeless families, homeless individuals off the street and get them into an indoor sleeping arrangement of some sort of another. And as that money started to dry up, those people went back out. COVID's not done. You know, we all know that it's not over. And, you know, you see more homeless people on the street than you've seen for a really long time. You see families who are still struggling. One thing that had happened with COVID is that daycares closed and they didn't reopen. And so even though there's lots of places to work, a lot of people are hiring, families can't go back to work because they have kids and they don't have anywhere to send them. So that's a huge thing. So COVID changed things a lot, where we all changed our services, we all adapted. Yeah, I think the heaviest lift was the food bank, though. You guys really did it all.
Yeah, the pandemic has been terrible for the folks that we serve. It has dramatically increased the number of folks that we all serve. It's been terrible for my staff. Like Doug was saying, we've been on the front lines for 18 months now, 19 months. We're exhausted. Fortunately, we engage in uplifting work, so that's what gets us out of bed every day, even though we're just completely wiped out. The work itself has become much harder. Serving one individual is at least twice as hard as it was pre-pandemic. You're having to adhere to so many safety protocols to protect our staff, our volunteers, and of course the folks that we're serving, because we don't want to become, you know, we don't want to instigate, what do they call them? They're not mega events, super spreaders. Right. You know, you convene, what were you saying, 600 individuals being served on a Monday evening. You don't want to convene 600 individuals and then that become a super spreader for the entire city of Woodland. So it's been, yeah, that part's been exhausting too. The silver lining from the pandemic is there's been so much media attention on the pandemic and the outfall from the pandemic that it's really pulled back the curtain on all of these pre-COVID unmet needs that were out there, you know, and the community became apparently for the first time aware that there's so much homelessness and so much poverty and food insecurity. And so that mobilized a bunch of resources, not just community resources, but, you know, local, state, and federal resources. On the food assistance piece, unfortunately, in the first year of the pandemic, we got a lot of governmental food flowing into the food bank that we were then able to distribute ourselves and then through our nonprofit partners. That's all gone away in the second year of the pandemic, as has, we've gotten this much funding in the second year of the pandemic. A big fat zero. And we're just sitting here going, we're still in the pandemic. I mean, it's still all hands on deck. Why are these resources going away? So that's something else everybody on the Zoom call can do, is they can call up their Congress people and senators and local officials and go, if food assistance was so important in the first year, why is it not important in the second year?
Okay, thank you so much for being here. I think that's all the time that we have for questions. We need to wrap up now. However, we really appreciated this conversation. I think it's really important for law students to hear these things and go out into their communities and be advocates. So I really appreciate you all being here and what your organizations do.
Yeah, and we're really sorry that we're not able to take the Zoom questions right now because another class is going to come in. But could you just like briefly, like, how can people get in touch? Just through like finding your website or?
Our website's empoweryolo.org.
Okay.
Fourth and Hope, it's FOURTHANDHOPE.org, and that's the best way to.
Okay.
YoloFoodBank.org, and I can be reached by email, michael@YoloFoodBank.org.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we can fist bump.